Thanks for joining me for this episode of God Talk. And I have to tell you, it's been a rough week for me. I started not feeling well last Friday. Friday night, I slept for 12 hours, which is about as much sleep as I normally get in a week. Then I couldn't sleep for the next 2 or 3 days because I slept too much on Friday, but I just had this upper respiratory thing. So Sunday, I just barely kind of got through service. At the end of it, I lost my voice. Just started getting it back. And then yesterday we had Ash Wednesday service. And I knew I needed to do a podcast and got service coming up again on Sunday. And so this may be a little shorter than normal. But I thought I'd get a little help on this, actually, tell you the truth. So rather than just kind of do this one myself. And by the way, let me tell you, I got something big coming next week. For those of you who have been around for a while, you'll remember a former employee that I had for a year. Yes, one whole year. But for those of the congregation is relatively new. It's a mobile area, so people move in, people move out. But most of you won't know this. But I actually had who was the former founder and lead singer of the Christian band Newsboys. He was my worship leader for a year. And so some of you maybe don't know who the Newsboys are, but if you're into Christian music for the last, I don't know, probably 25 years or so, they've been one of the top bands. So I am talking to him next week. He's got a really cool grace story, salvation story, and I look forward to sharing that interview with you next week. Almost as big is having John James. I've got a co-host today, and it's Zach Sample. He's kind of my, he does a lot of my teaching, assimilation, just kind of whatever needs to get done type job around here, kind of a utility role. Really gifted young man. He's, I don't know, 33? 31. Oh, wow, even younger than I thought. But anyways, wise beyond his years. But he's from Chicago and he's kind of got a big mouth. And so I figured, he could help me fill some time on this episode of podcast when maybe my creative juices are a little lacking. So what I thought is this is actually something I can do every so often. I might just need a little help. And so I thought maybe we would have an episode of Ask Zach. So that's what we're doing with Ask Zach. And so I think fitting like this type of a podcast, I can even use my pretty cool sound effects. So I would like all of you to welcome Zach Sample for our very first installment of Ask Zach. Man, that's pretty high tech, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I feel like John James in front of 20,000 people,
right,
in a huge stadium.
Well, that might deserve a. Oh wait,
I
was expecting a bigger O or something. So, I probably should get a little more trained on some of these little buttons I've got on my phone before I hit too many of those. I might just stick to the clapping, the cheering, and the booing. There's a laugh one too.
The booing will probably be more common.
Booing might work well. So Zach's a little nervous. I came back from lunch and I said, asked him what he was doing, and I told him what I wanted to do, and he looked a little nervous that potentially I might be throwing on something on him that might be kind of hard for him to kind of do off the top of his head. But I think that's part of the fun of Ask Zach. So Zach, are you up for the very first installment of the episode of Ask Zach?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just like to preface that please don't let this affect your opinion or your decision to come to my Bible studies, because those are fun and non-pressure, and I get to study and be prepared. So,
well, if he does good, you'll definitely want to go to his Bible studies. But the first thing I've got to get him to do is keep his mic closer to his mouth.
I'm sorry.
So that you can hear him well. But so it was interesting. So when I was working on my Ash Wednesday message yesterday, something kind of jumped out at me that I'm not fully prepared to answer myself. In fact, I have to be honest, coming back from lunch while I was driving, I actually started to do an episode by myself, but I only got like 3.5 minutes into it and I was a little stumped. So that's why I thought we'd ask Zach, because once again, he's from Chicago. He's got some opinions, which I listen. I'm from Western New York. I've got opinions. So when we both go kind of back and forth, we can kind of run our mouths, and so it might be entertaining or it might be an epic fail. But so Zach, here's what I was working on. So I thought it was interesting when considering Jonah in Nineveh. It's really Jonah chapter 1 verse 2. God says, "Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness comes up before me." So, with your just vast knowledge of your 31 years,
Yeah.
why is it, do you think, from either a societal perspective or a religious perspective, since this is, of course, God talk, what is it about big cities that make them wicked? And before you answer it, I'm giving you some time to process while I'm still running my mouth here. But if you think about the biggest cities, those tend to be the most wicked. When you think about like even elections in America, it's always interesting to look at the map. So it doesn't matter what the state is. It looks like 90% of the country is, I think, red's Republican, blue like is conservative, right? It's all the major cities that aren't, but that's the population centers and so forth. And so I can't think of one major city that is still kind of conservative. And I don't want to make this into politics, Republican, Democrat thing, but progressive versus conservative. Fort Worth would probably be the closest example that I know of a larger city. It's a pretty large city that until at least the last few years still was a slight majority conservative. But all things being equal, big cities are progressive. Big cities are where you're going to find your gangs. Big cities are where you find your prostitution rings. Big cities are going to be where probably human trafficking. Big cities are going to have the higher crime rate. And so I think it's interesting. The great city of Nineveh, and it was exceedingly wicked. And so just kind of curious on this very first installment of Ask Zach, give us some insight, since you've had like a minute and a half to contemplate this, as to why you think that wickedness predominates in larger cities more than smaller cities in rural areas. And as you talk, I might kind of give some feedback and maybe a rabbit hole or two to go down.
Sure. So first when I'm thinking about this, breaking it down, I kind of want to establish like one thing first before we start throwing things like diversity and differences in backgrounds and cultures and all that, because in no way is there any offensiveness that should be taken or any type of way, because simply we are called to celebrate our pasts and our diversities and experiences as long as we recognize our new identity is in Christ as believers. So wherever you come from, the culture, the country, your experiences, what you've gone through, that doesn't matter. It matters, and we celebrate because that's who you are, but your identity is now found in Christ if you're part of the community.
So first of all, let's just be clear. He's worried about offending you guys, and I don't seem to usually worry about that at all. I would just start like making jokes about different like parts of the country, different cities, whatever. So, all right, good for you. You're showing some sensitivity here. All right, with that disclaimer now, and let's just give him a little cheer for that cultural sensitivity.
It's perfect.
All right.
It's perfect. Yeah. Well, okay. I am a millennial, so, we think with our feelings first.
You guys are a little more sensitive.
Yeah, we're a little bit more sensitive.
Okay, good. That's not bad. That's not bad. All right.
Yeah. So I just want to get that out first when talking about differences of people. We celebrate those because that's who God created you to be in a new way, but our identity is now found in Christ. And so that's where we come together. That's where we celebrate and those types of ways. And that's what the church is. So when the question was, why do big cities seem to fall into sin greater than smaller cities? Simply because of diversity. You get many different peoples from different parts of the country, many different ages. A lot of times when people do come in or they come from a different country or place, they usually come by themselves and not necessarily with a family. With the families that come together and families that, the rural place have a lot more family feel to it. There's lots of legacy, and within the same area, the same town, the same small place, families kind of stay there and they come together and that type of way. And the culture kind of becomes settled. for what it is, especially in the United States and in rural places. It's kind of settled, mom and pop, they've been around forever, a small town feel, go to church every week, we're patriots, and someone, grandpa or uncle or son, is a fights in a war, is involved in the military. It's just kind of a part of Western culture, kind of settles into the rural places. And when you go to the big cities, that's where you experience diversity. And
so that's interesting. And honestly, like, it's just dawning on me. I'm asking him this question. He's from Chicago, which is a pretty wicked city. But that was not planned. That's like, I tend to stumble into these things rather than people are like, oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, no, I actually wasn't thinking that. But so the diversity thing's interesting. Like, on one hand, it's like, whoa, are you saying like the other people are bad and we're not?
I established that.
Yeah, right. Now I know why your disclaimer. But it is fair to say, especially if you take a place like Chicago or New York or some of these bigger cities where you have people not only coming, like, they're coming from different parts of the world with different values, different whatever, and so forth. So I'm not gonna push back, but I think there's something more. And the only reason, like, I researched this for the 5 minutes while you're picking your son up from preschool, and I thought, wow, that there's truth to that. But did you want to go in more with that diversity before? I think I've got something bigger than that.
Well, I have a second thought to that. The diversity side of that, to touch on it, like I mentioned, you get a lot of people from all over the country, all over the world, even country, different places, and you bring in different ideas, values, those types of things. And in the bigger cities, that's celebrated as the identity of the person. And in the smaller towns, smaller cities where Christianity and Western religion is more prominent, our identity is found in something greater. And so you rally around that. Even the United States was founded with this idea of something greater, this republic, or this coming together of individualized people for one common good and one common thing. So it's even the West now, and kind of how the United States was created, we see that settled in rural places, in the country, in those types of things. In the city, it's more the diversity is the celebration, not the unity that's celebrated. So I think there's that. But the second thing also, in Nineveh, in ancient big cities, even now, the big cities is where all the money is.
Okay.
And so my second thought
that's a good
is
one.
money.
I didn't think about that one. Good one.
Money
Corrupts.
Money corrupts. If you're married, money's the biggest thing you're fighting with your wife about. If you're, trying to get through college and pay for it yourself, money's going to drive you crazy. You end up either resenting it or you end up falling in love with it, because money is absolutely a resource that the Lord has given us, but it is without a doubt used and abused by the devil. Okay. And so I think that's another thing, another part of it.
We're going to have to cheer. That was a good one.
Oh, thank you.
So diversity is almost celebrated as the example. Instead of money in big cities, and just think about like gambling, organized crime, like all that is going to follow the money. In some other things that I read, like there's just more supply of automobiles to steal from, and houses. Like there's just more resources in those for crime to take place. But are you ready for what I think could be the biggest one?
Yeah, but can I press a button if it's a clap or a boo?
Potentially, but before we do, since this is going to be like I think the real reason, we need a drum roll. Oh. All right, so. Anonymity in big cities.
Interesting.
Anonymity. And if you think about that, right? No one like you can get lost, you can hide, like everything like in the Bible is like, being out in the light, in the public, accountability, just like all those different things in small towns. Listen, if Grandpa Jones' tractor disappears, there's going to be a hullabaloo about that, and they're going to track down, and some nosy neighbor is going to be watching, and have seen something, and they're going to get caught because you know what? In small towns, and I grew up in one, like everyone's stinking out their window watching someone else. They're nosy, and it honestly can kind of get on your nerves. But there's nothing else going on. But in a big city, like there's so much going on. I know, at least for me, like I want to shut myself down. We've got fences where like the backyards you can't see in. You open your garage door and as quickly as you can get in. It's just so easy to get lost in a big city that, I can't help but think that a major part of it, if not the most major part, is it's easy to hide nefarious intents in large cities. What's your thought on that?
I think not even from a nefarious standpoint, that's obvious with what you're talking about. But even if you look at within the church world, anonymity, look at mega churches,
big church versus small church,
big church versus small church.
Yeah.
With big churches, big cities, you can kind of get in, do your thing, get out. That kind of this is just kind of what I'm supposed to do. It's a checkbox, a checklist. Go to work, come home. Go to church, come home. Do that. This versus, making your community a part of your life and doing life together.
No accountability.
No accountability in those things. So absolutely, I think the anonymity, same like if we mentioned big church, small church. If you come to our church, we don't necessarily pressure, but we highly encourage that we all do life together. Right. Like it's just whether it's small groups or here on Wednesday nights and Sundays and all of that. And my family, we moved here from Houston 6 months ago, and I probably have the best friends I've ever had my whole life being here just 6 months. Because like we're kind of north of Fort Worth, but we're still in the city, but kind of north. But we have that feeling of the community because we don't want to be anonymous,
right?
In that type of way. And I don't think we're called to be anonymous. In fact, I know we're not called to be anonymous. Adam was created, and then it was obvious to God he needed a helpmate. And so he created Eve.
But interesting you talk about Adam. What do they do when they sin? They hide. So once again, you have that ability to hide in large cities, even large congregations, large anything, right? Honestly, a large company. Like
true. That's very true.
Yeah, you're hiding other people doing the work. No one's known you're missing, right? Like, and so that's interesting you bring up, Adam and Eve. But once again, that being able to just blend in and not be noticed, just allows, I think, laziness, like corruption, like all those other things to kind of come in. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that you finished my thought with it.
All right. Well, all right. So we're 17 and a half minutes, and I run, 18 minutes normally when it's myself. But you did say that if I did a Ask Zach, there should be an Ask Greg.
Oh, man.
So I may or may not answer it because my brain isn't necessarily functioning quite at 100%. But if you've got something like if you got something to throw at me real quick, here's your big chance. If not, like John James is next.
John James is next.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to think. I'm not trying to make it a whoa question.
Man, my O button's pretty.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Wait. Here we go.
That's a drum roll.
All right, here it comes.
In 1 Corinthians, it talks about prophesying, not to forsake it, but also not to forsake speaking in tongues. So as a born Pentecostal boy that's now converted to Lutheranism.
Do they have Pentecostalism in Chicago?
Well, no, that was more because we moved out in the desert in Arizona. And there was...
To cult?
No. There was a big movement of Assemblies of God churches out in the Phoenix area and then out more. And then my grandparents lived on a Native American reservation. And so there was a predominant, very spiritual people as it is. There was a predominant community of Pentecostals out there.
Is that like peyote? Is that the stuff that they smoke?
It wasn't anything like that. No. So the question, we know that prophesying is speaking words of encouragement in those type of ways.
Right.
But it says to everyone Paul is encouraging everyone to do that, but also not to forsake speaking in tongues.
Yeah.
So if we were in a prayer meeting and someone is during their prayer to themselves speaking in tongues, how would you call that or address that?
I'd say, shut up, you're distracting me. I mean, probably because there's always those people that are like, yes, Lord Jesus, amen. Yes, I'm like getting on a roll, and I'm like, I feel like God's talking to me, and it's like someone's yapping in your ear,
absolutely,
and it just distracts you. Yeah, it's interesting, the whole speaking in tongues thing. obviously when I think about like Pentecost, I mean, that was the sign, right? For people that God was doing something, but not only that, it was practical that like they're all from different nations and they understood what was being said. So here's my big deal of speaking in tongues. And Paul says, I think that he refers to as like the least of the gifts, I think.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But it certainly is a gift. But here's what kind of bugs me about it is when you go to these churches and there's someone speaking in tongues and then so the person speaks English, but yet they're speaking in tongues. Then another person has come back and put it in English. God's not like, God's a God of order. That's an extra step that's ridiculous and just doesn't make sense. So I'm not a big fan of speaking in tongues in terms of that. I would be if like you had a gathering of nations and or even a church where, well, I mean, goodness gracious, Chicago, you can like have people with 20 different languages come together. So if there's a movement of God there and like there is a common language that everyone's hearing or somehow someone's speaking, I don't know, where it's like Pentecost, where like everyone's just hearing it and understanding of their own language. No problem with it at all. I also don't have a problem with it, in terms of like a private prayer language. Yeah. And I've never spoken in tongues, but what in my private prayer, but what I do have sometimes is this kind of a rapidness of thought in which I'm not speaking out loud.
Interesting.
But like my thoughts are going so fast that I'm not completing the thoughts. It's almost like if you're watching a movie in like 10 times speed, and that's what my thoughts are doing is my prayers, and I'm not controlling that. The Bible talks about the Spirit groaning out, in our own behalf, and I can almost feel like, and this doesn't happen often, but the times it has, like all these prayers are being offered up on my behalf that aren't necessarily fully formed thoughts where English is coming out of my head to God, right? And so that would be the closest that I've seen to it. If people need to do that out loud and somehow that edifies them in their own private prayer language, I wouldn't have a problem with it. My problem with it is when it becomes distracting to people around you, then it inhibits more than it helps. And God's a God of order, not disorder. Thoughts?
That's exactly my thoughts. When I was 5 years old, my grandpa was holding me up over a crowd of people watching a demon be cast out of a woman, and my grandmother was the one doing the casting out, and he was like, "You have to watch this; it's going to be a part of your life." And so, my whole life, I've seen the crazy stuff. I've been in the conga lines. I've been at the 1 hour pre-service prayers, the 1 hour after tongues of fire after prayer service, and grew up with all of that. But in my teenage years, I started feeling this seems a little bit unorganized.
Yeah. And
I know that's the easy way to understand it in that way, because it didn't seem like there was order to it. And, I was in Assemblies of God and in Pentecostal up until I started working in ministry, and kind of went to a non-denominational church, then back to AG, and then, more liturgical, traditional traditions now. And so when I started working on my seminary degree and those types of things, it all started, this feeling I had was like, oh no, God is a God of order.
Yeah.
And he doesn't bring about chaos. And if it's orderful and there's a way to it, it has to edify the church.
Yeah.
And in that type of way, if everything is created to edify the church for the coming kingdom, then things that are purposely bringing disunity maybe, or bringing a discomfort between people, you can be uncomfortable because the pastor's saying something that you feel in your heart you need to change,
right?
But causing someone to bring this is weird and trippy, I got to get out of here,
right? So
when you're bringing about that distraction, discomfort, disunity, all those things into the church, that's when it becomes a problem. So to me, it's when it starts to become a big problem. So that was my question on it was, it's like we are to prophesy. And I think that actually goes back to what we talked about, even small church, big church.
Right.
If you go to a small church, most of the time you find people connect with. And so I asked the question was make the circle, but especially here, constant just words of encouragement and love from people. And on top of that, prophesying doesn't have to be comfortable. It can be uncomfortable, and it can be someone holding you accountable.
Right.
And I can tell you for myself, I'm on staff as a discipleship minister or whatever, and I have members calling me out on my stuff. They're very close friends and people I trust, but they're still prophesying in a way and giving me words in a way that are edifying me within the church and the church ultimately as well. So that was my only question, was to kind of bring it back. And then why does Paul reference tongues so much? And I think it's because he's showing the contrast of what should be the most common, which is encouraging, helping, trusting, holding accountable. And then the other spectrum, which is if there's a place for it and it will edify the church, God will order something crazy and supernatural to happen.
Right.
So I think that's why Paul's referencing those two contrasts with each other so many times. But I wanted to bring that back to, small church, big church type thing, and anonymity, or being a part of something important, being a part of something bigger than yourself.
Yeah. Cool. No, good question. I really appreciate Zach, you kind of helping me out on this one. I think it's a good conversation, and once again, Zach's got the ability to kind of gab off the cuff. So on occasion, maybe every 6 weeks or so, we will probably have another installment of Ask Zach, and don't forget next week. I mean, it's gonna be a big one. The former lead singer, founding singer of the Newsboys. I look forward, especially for those of you who haven't heard a story, to hear a story, and should be a good time. Zach, just once again, thanks for being a good sport and helping out. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you, everyone. Very blessed. Thank you.
And I need to know if you like the buttons, right? I don't normally use the effects, but especially I think on the episodes of Ask Zach, I think the effects, we got some others though. There's Magic Spell, Horror, Fanfare. We did Drum Roll. We got Comedy Correct. We got a few more to explore here.
I feel like it's going to just be a Zach thing.
Well, and potentially on the next episode of Ask Zach, I'll give you the buttons.
That's perfect.
I'm a little nervous how that might turn out though. But anyways, I appreciate everyone joining me for this episode of God Talk. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and I look forward to hearing from you and talking to you next week. God bless.